Get it started. Okay, I'm going to run through enterprise risk management. My experience of it was as part of Eurocopter, an EADS division based down in Oxford, trying to integrate risks between France, Romania, UK suppliers and sharing them with the MOD customer as well. This is really structured around a National Audit Office report that I came across and read, which was looking about risk management best practices, mainly in government departments. But what I did notice after reading it, it's very similar, if not exactly the same, to my experiences within industry, the findings from the report. So, who am I? I'm Michael Higgins. A lot of people call me Mick. Born in 1979. I have one wife-to-be, 4 children, 1 dog, and now I own a people carrier. My career history, I started at BAE Systems in 1996. I was an engineering apprentice, worked my way through that system, through the MVQs, the BTECs, moved into the technical offices where I was faced with the Typhoon programme, using Open Plan Professional, Cobra, and basically pulling out the reports, doing the scheduling, the planning, and the earned value management. Within BAE, I moved to US business on the T-45 Goshawk, and also the AV-8B Harrier, the American variants of the aircraft, where I was responsible for the asset management system for AV-8B, and also the implementation of an EV system on the T-45 Goshawk, as well as the usual generic planning. I then moved back to the Eurofighter department, integrated exchange repair service, basically to get them ready for an integrated baseline review. Okay. I was then in 2004 approached by BMT Sigma, now BMT HiQ Sigma, and I stayed there to 2007. Roles there were supporting implementation of earned value management, a lot of integrated baseline reviews, demonstration reviews across the MOD departments themselves and also industry between the UK and America. One of our clients at the time was Thales. They noticed how talented and gifted I was, so they thought they'd have a bit of that. They'd noticed that their skills in earned value management were lacking, so they made me the project control divisional manager for project control. I covered 8 sites, a lot of parachuting into projects, problem projects, and helping them set up systems, understand the data, and the way forward for them. And then in 2009, I wanted a new challenge. I wanted to get back away from the functional side of things and more into the actual delivery side of things on a programme. And I came across Eurocopter. You've probably heard about it, the Puma helicopter Mark II. It's been in the press quite a bit recently. To implement their earned value management system, their enterprise risk management system, their scheduling and day-to-day project management support. 2011, in May this year, I set up on my own, Execom Limited. I'm not too sure where that's going to go yet. At the moment, it's been operating for 7 months. We've done some support across some of the construction industry via some of our key partners and also the nuclear decommissioning industry. And we've been back into Eurocopter as well to do some support and handover training type activities. So that's me, quite a bit. Today, I'm going to cover what is this thing, enterprise risk management. I think you're probably all aware of what risk management and opportunity management is, but what is an enterprise risk management system? The National Audit Office, the Good Practice Report, basically running through the principles that they were looking through and the findings of that report. And then, what does it actually look like? And implementing ERM. So how do you go about this? Looking at the organisation aspects, looking at the processes, and also looking at the tool sets that can be involved. So, the definition I actually took from Wikipedia. It's pretty much the same definition when I've read through books or when I've looked at articles written by other people. Enterprise risk management includes methods and processes used by organisations to manage risks and seize any opportunities related to the achievements of the business objectives. It can also be described as a risk-based approach in managing enterprise, integrating concepts of internal control, help support Sorsban's-Oxley, and also help you to do some more strategic planning at the board level to make key decisions with information you're getting through the system. Anyone disagree with those type of definitions?
I don't know what Sarbanes-Oxley is.
Sarbanes-Oxley Act was brought into existence to monitor the control and effectiveness of organisations. So it's really a governance-type document that was brought out in the USA to govern organisations and to really prevent fraudulent activities and making sure that boards are giving best value and best practice to shareholders of organisations. It's quite a key act, to be honest. Okay, the National Audit Office report. It was published in June 2011, and what they've done is focused on 6 principles. Principle 1, an engaged board focuses on the business, on managing things that actually matter. So why is that important? Well, the board actually sets the agenda and the scene of the risk management, enterprise risk management. If staff believe that the board views risks as a key part of the successful business and a key part of running a successful business to achieve their business objectives, they're more likely to buy into the risk management process. The communication of the organisational risks, the key organisational risks, help to understand and engage the management within an organisation in handling these risks. So you can make priority choices depending on the severity of these risks. And the board sets the tone and can create a no-blame culture within the organisation. So really what's key here is to make sure that there's top-level support at the very top level in an organisation, so this thing called enterprise risk management can actually work. I'll probably use the example of EADS and Eurocopter, and I'll refer back to those a little bit later. Principle 2, the response to risk is most appropriate when tolerance of risk is clearly defined. Okay, in a lot of organisations, they don't actually define the tolerance of risk. So what it does provide, if you define your tolerance of risk, is clarity about the risk and the decisions that makers can actually make, or the decisions that makers make. Can improve the understanding of the key priorities of the risk, and it can empower staff to make key decisions as well. So this is really about setting levels of risk in the organisation. So what would you actually do about a risk if the tolerance of that risk is high, or if it's low? Which approach would you actually take? Principle 3, risk management is most effective when ownership and accountability for risk is clear. So the board provides the board with assurance, having an accountability model in place, that management are actually using the risk process properly, and that the information that's been provided is as accurate as possible. And it gives the confidence that the risk can be and will be escalated if required through the system. Is anyone else actually running an enterprise risk management system at the moment? No?
We've got a risk management system and it's projects that was right.
Is that an enterprise-wide system, or is that a project by project? Right, okay. Principle 4. Effective decision making is underpinned by good quality of information. It's like any system. Poor quality of information in, poor quality of information, and then poor quality of potential decisions that you make for an organisation, developing its strategy going forward. So again, this is about integrating your financial information, your performance information, and sharing that across the organisation in terms of risk to make key decisions. Principle 5, decision making is informed, a considered and rigorous evaluation and costing of risk. It's important to cost our risk, to understand what the implications are if they impact on a programme or an organisation and its objectives. It's also important to understand the mitigation costs. So do we let the risk impact? Because financially it's better to let the risk impact than actually mitigate the risk. So it's having that information so you can make decisions whether you mitigate, whether you apply contingency, or you let the risk impact the organisation. And Principle 6, future outcomes are improved by implementing lessons learned. And I think across the project controls and project management community, there seems to be a lot of focus on lessons learned. So what have we learned from other programs, other divisions, other departments in an organisation? And again, this can enable an organisation to have a more consistent, effective and efficient set of processes, tool sets and systems in place to improve their risk management insight going forward in the future. And it also, you can use it to improve communication across the organisation, where one programme may have had a risk and tried a mitigation activity that's been unsuccessful. Another programme in the same organisation may have the same risk. Now, if they understand that that mitigation activity was unsuccessful, they can re-plan and rethink about how they could potentially mitigate that risk. So they're the 6 principles that they actually studied as part of the National Audit Office report.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If it's not in terms of cost, what are the units of measurement of risk?
You've got cost, you've got schedule, and you've got the performance of the risk.
You can measure that. You've got some way of...
Yeah, you can measure that. I mean,
like you talked about proportionate risk. So say you've got a scheduled risk. Is it made into 90% or statistical?
You can use statistical analysis of it. You can use the risk analysis process, cost risk analysis, schedule risk analysis, which sends it through analytics, standard deviation type analytics, to give you an indication as to what the likely cost is of the risk impacting or the likely schedule impact is. You can actually apply, if it's more of the performance of I don't know, in the case of the helicopters, the performance of the rotor blades, you can add a performance impact indicator as well. So if this risk impacts on this element of the helicopter, this is the impact of the performance of that final delivery of item. Okay. Run through the findings of the report. Principle 1, which is all about an engaged board, being focused on the business or managing the things that matter. Leadership and ownership and management is inconsistent. Discussions do not always focus on those significant issues that could pose the biggest risk. And there's more for boards to do visibly to communicate the commitment and understanding of the risk management process through the organisation. Now, if you've been involved in risk management, I'm sure you'll pretty much agree with most of this. Don't get me wrong, there's some good practice out there where all this is already done. Prime example that I came across was as part of Eurocopter. Eurocopter had, part of EADS in fact, at the board level of EADS, they had a risk management officer who was directly linked to the CEO of the organisation. It was his responsibility to drive the policy, the process and the solution through the whole of EADS. Now that was broken down into each of the EADS divisions, Eurocopter being one of them. Eurocopter had central support team, so they had a function dedicated to enterprise risk management who supported the tool sets, the processes and the training elements. So there's a lot of investment and a lot of very capable, skilled specialists within the organisation. And the board wanted quarterly reports on risk management from project level all the way up to division level to organisational level. And they used that as part of their feedback to their stakeholders and the wider community. Okay. Principle 2, the response to risk is most proportionate when the tolerance of risk is defined and articulated. Some organisations think risk tolerance is too difficult to define due to the size and diversity of the organisation. So you may have a £1 billion programme that needs delivering. Your risk tolerance for that programme will be different to the risk tolerance for a £10,000 programme. My experience through the enterprise risk management is you can actually split and define per programme, per division, per element of the organisation, your specific risk tolerances. And then you can aggregate that up to a business level, depending on the systems and the solutions that you've actually decided to go down and you've put in place. Risk management is most effective when ownership and accountability of risk is clear. It's like anything. If you know who owns it and who's accountable for something, then you know where to go to find out the right information. Lack of clarity over ownership currently, and understanding and accountability for risks, and lack of risk escalation process. Again, my experience with the EADS model was they had a very robust set of roles and responsibilities. So in terms of the stakeholder community, you'd have your risk managers, you would have your risk owners, you'd have your risk administrators, you'd have your risk management officer, you'd have your program managers, and each key stakeholder had a specific role and responsibility related to the risk management. And that was absolutely key in driving forward, so we could identify who was accountable for what risk and who actually owned that risk. Lack of risk escalation process. Again, the escalation process experience that I had was if I had a risk at my program level that I was managing, due to the nature of the system and the process that was put in place and the policy, it was quite simple to escalate it up right to the CEO level if necessary, if it was deemed that critical of a risk to go down that route. Principle 4, effective decision making is underpinned by good quality information. What they found from the report is risk information reported is not always fully integrated with the performance and financial information of a program, project, division, however you've decided to structure your risk for your organisation. Discussions are typically focused around the content of the risk register. And again, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, you go to a risk review and you end up discussing what's in your risk register, how many risks you have in the risk register, rather than actually asking the question, how do we deal with these risks? How are we actually going to manage this risk and mitigate it? Do we need to mitigate it? A lot of the time it seems to be a tick box exercise in managing risk. Okay, we've had a risk review this month, let's park risk now. There's not really a truly integrated way of doing it. Principle 5, decision making is informed by considered and rigorous evaluation of costing of risk. They've found little costing of risks and little costing of the mitigations, so you can do that cost assessment and trade off against each other. Costing of risk is deemed too difficult or not practical given the nature of your business operations. Okay. Principle 6, future outcomes are improved by implementing lessons learned. Lessons learned aren't currently used actively to drive towards continuous improvement, and internal audit functions often repeat the findings that they've already had from previous audits within the latest current audit reports. Okay. So I started thinking, what does enterprise risk management actually look like? And I thought I could put a lot of bullet points on there, I could put a lot of pretty pictures and really clever stuff, but to me this summed it up. It's the true integration across your organisation of risk information, risk and opportunity information. It's integrating your suppliers into your risk management system, and it's sharing the appropriate information with your clients or your customer. Again, back to what I consider to be a very good practice of enterprise risk management. We integrated our supply base into our risks. The tool set and the system we used was Active Risk Management, ARM. That enabled us to send templates to our suppliers who populated it on a monthly basis, could then fire us back to us as an organisation, and we integrated them into our PID assessment, so probability impact diagram assessment. And we did our own internal assessment upon their risks, because what may be critical to one of our suppliers isn't actually that critical to our main programme in delivering its outcomes. So we would do an internal review on that. We then could export the information in either report format or CSV file format into our customers, so they could then perform the same analysis on us as an organisation. The capability we had, we'd be right down here as a programme, the CEO's right here in the organisational level. Any issues that could potentially impact on the organisational objectives or the actual programme itself that was deemed big enough where the programme may be cancelled, going through the defence reviews, then this was fired up straight to the CEO level. So the CEO could then start managing at that level that potential risk that could impact. or that potential opportunity if there was a potential opportunity that was big enough. The key in all of this, is what I'll go into next, was having the organisational structure in place. It was having the support from the risk function in place. It was having the tool sets integrated and the architecture ready for us in place, and having the experts on hand. So if I had a problem, I could ring up France, say, guys, I've got a really big issue here. The risk system's crashed. Not a problem, leave it with me, Mick. Maybe a couple of days later, it was up and running again. Okay, so it's a truly integrated way of looking at risk. So when you're implementing this thing, some of the key things, it's important to set the vision. So what do you want the organisation to get out of this thing called ERM? What's the vision for the implementation of this? It provides a consistent risk picture across an organisation, from owners to executives. Okay, so it's a key vision. I want somebody from the engineering floor who's a risk owner to be able to have that capability to communicate with our CEO that there is potentially a risk that could cripple the programme or have a severe impact on the organisation. I need that visibility. Development of risk management practices up to becoming a key driver in decision making. Okay, so it's developing the processes, developing your skills, your staff, and the understanding that this thing risk isn't just a monthly tick in the box exercise. This thing risk can actually really influence the way that decisions are made for the organisation's future direction. And then they looked at setting the objectives for ERM. So we need to get the awareness from operations to the XMT, the executive team level, of risks and opportunities regards to business objectives. Control and monitor at each level risks to take, the ones that we're going to mitigate, and the ones that will hedge or will control. And become compliant with corporate policy and governance. So making sure that if we have a policy set, that the organisation becomes compliant with that policy and that it's governed and that we understand exactly who's doing what, where, when, and who's accountable for it. The actual organisation itself, well, to be effective, it's key to have an organisation that can support both the running of the ERM and the implementation of it in the first place. All too often you go to implementations of software, implementations of processes, and if it's not got that top level stakeholder buy-in, that real push factor through the organisation, then 9 times out of 10 it's likely to fail. Without having that key top level support, there isn't always necessarily the management want and will to drive the process or the implementation forward. So top level sponsorship, executive sponsorship, straight from the CEO level to drive this through the organisation. Dedicated risk management office or officer reporting directly to the CEO to control all the activities. Dedicated ERM leads responsible to divisions or departments. So you can see a structure building up. You've got your main corporate element, so you'd have your CEO at this level. You'd have your dedicated risk management officer at this level, and then in each of the divisions you'd have a risk management lead who'd be responsible for the tool set, the process and the people. And then ERM function and sub-functions of the PMO. So within each of your divisions you would have a function for that division, and that function would be responsible for the actual delivery of the process, the tool set and the training, the cultural change. And again, you've got risk managers and owners and wider stakeholders in the community. I think this is really key when you're implementing enterprise risk management. Without a lot of this structure in place and a lot of investment in the people in this structure, from a UK perspective, trying to integrate all these risks together and not having the tool set would have been a nightmare. Not having the processes in place, we wouldn't have been able to help me to convince management that this is the way that we need to do things, and without having the people to back me up as well. So when I came unstuck or didn't understand exactly what was meant to be going on, I had an expert on hand that I could ring and call upon. Processes, as with any process, essential that policy is set at the highest level possible to drive it through the organisation. It needs to be defined and communicated, as per all processes, and specific toolset processes. What I find in a lot of organisations, whether it be EVM, whether it be risk management, whether it be scheduling, burn schedule, whatever the process is, when it comes to the toolset, unless the toolset itself's got a really good integrated online help system, 9 times out of 10, the process starts failing with the toolset itself. So it's having easily identifiable and understandable processes in place for toolsets. Where do I point and click? When I point and click there, what am I actually doing? So it's having that understanding behind it rather than a generic, I had to use the word toolset monkey. Processes should be tailored and adopted for key enterprise risk management roles. So you would have a process that a risk manager would go through, a process that a director would go through, a process that a risk management officer would go through on a monthly or a quarterly basis. When I first came into Eurocopter UK, the main programme that we were working on, they started out with an Excel template for managing all their risks. That was predominantly it. As soon as the enterprise risk management started getting more integrated into the organisation, the main programme, the defence programme we worked on, it was active risk manager, it was all the processes, the support, the solution behind it, all the training as well involved, all the seminars and conferences internally to share experiences and ideas. But it didn't just have to be, you don't just have to go down a complex route. Eurocopter UK as an organisation, as an arm of Eurocopter, used Excel sheets. So the engineering division, the financial department, the commercial department would on a quarterly basis fill out their risks in an Excel format. The defence division would export their risks from their system straight into their Excel system, and that is what they would feed up to the board level at that point, okay, on a quarterly basis. Whereas we needed an integrated solution for the programme because of the complexity, the sheer amount of stakeholders and external subcontractors that we were using, and really to meet our customer requirements, to show them that, look, we have got a risk capability in place and we are managing our risks pretty well. Okay. And again, the processes were tailored for individuals. Well, I say individuals, but the roles and responsibilities of the organisation. Okay, toolset. What are the conversations around toolset? Probably because it enables you to do a lot more efficiently, a lot quicker, integrate with other elements, other programs, and integrate with other aspects of the organisation. So the integration of the appropriate software is key, and I say appropriate software because it's not always going to be appropriate to impose a multi-million-pound piece of software onto a £10,000 programme. It's not always going to be appropriate to implement this type of software onto an organisation that's turnovers maybe only, say, £500,000 a year. So it's integrating what's appropriate for your organisation to enable you to have some form of enterprise risk management. Where appropriate, a company-wide rollout of a fully integrated ERM software package. So where you are a big organisation and you've got multiple programs, multiple complexities, multiple customers, multiple subcontractors, and you want to bring this all together so you can understand the impact of your business objectives, then something like Active Risk Manager or a similar software is probably more appropriate for you to integrate all these risks together and have a really dynamic enterprise system in place. As part of doing this, what we found as well is access levels. It's important to define and set these pretty early on. So I'm a risk manager. What am I allowed to access and see in the system? Is it just my program? Is it the whole of the division, the whole of the organisation? What am I allowed to see in terms of the risks? What am I allowed to do in the system? We found also the customisation of reporting key, especially when dealing with the customer. The customer in our case wasn't interested in having 100 risks a month, a report of 100 risks in the system sent to him. He was really, really interested in our top 10 risks on a monthly basis. Where were they? The big hitters, potential showstoppers and what we were doing about them. The system that we put in place enabled us to do this, and enabled us to bring in the supplier risk. So if it was a supplier risk that was going to cause the issue, the customer was aware that even though we're managing the suppliers, it's actually the supplier that's causing that risk, potentially. And the key one that we found as well, a sandbox area. Before you implement any of these tool sets, especially as part of the training and development process for the people who are going to be operating these tool sets, we found that the sandbox area, the test area to play with the tool set before you actually put it on a live server and put real life information into it that potentially could be flowed up to the CEO, it was essential. We made all our mistakes in the sandbox, we learnt a lot of lessons from the sandbox, and we took them forward and implemented it into the cut over to the production server. And just a couple of indexes, a couple of books I've read in the past, and where I actually got a National Audit Office report from. And we've got 10 minutes for questions. Or responses, or heckles.
You talked about managing risk and the structure of your organisation to manage risks in the RM type environment. How does that fit with project controls more widely with cost and schedule? Is that independent?
I mean, in my experience it is. At the moment what you tend to have, I'm not saying for every organisation, I would say for the majority that I've worked in, I would say risk is treated as a separate silo. EVM type, project control scheduling is also treated as a separate silo. A lot of the issues that we had when we were looking at doing schedule risk analysis is the tool set wouldn't allow us to do the detailed schedule risk analysis that we wanted to without being further developed by the function, because they turned that capability off. Again, they had a strategic roadmap of, well, we'll give them this bit of the capability first and we'll get the risks in there up and running, the reporting system going, and then we'll give them the capability for the more advanced risk analysis elements. So the experience I've had is there's a lot of silos, a lot of good intentions, but then I've come across programs that do the full integrated schedule risk analysis, the full cost risk analysis, the 3-point estimating. Also come across organisations that have started looking at integrating things like the earned value management into risk management. There's been a lot of talk about it. Nimrod MRFO program was one of them. They integrated their risk management into their earned value management. So some do, some don't. I would say the majority don't. I'll say another key issue as well is planning, scheduling. Key difference between planners and schedulers, and I think some organisations get this wrong. Schedulers tend to be people who can drive the tool set, put the information into a system, pull out reports from the system and interpret them. Planners understand the engineering aspect, know how to plan out the work as it's intended to be delivered before it's then put into a tool set. And I think within the UK at the moment there's too many schedulers in planning roles, and I think there's some confusion with that. And considering that your risk analysis, your earned value management, your baselines, your critical path is all hinged off the schedule, it's pretty key to start focusing on getting that right, I think. So it's almost back to basics in some cases.
We definitely have engineering planners
Yeah.
using that terminology. Because the analysis is done in the programme, it makes risk and planning very closely linked in our organisation at the moment.
Yeah,
Not doing ERM, but
yeah, I mean at Talis we used, I think the tool set we used was PertMaster at the time, a really capable tool. We imported our schedules into that, the costing of the schedules, went through all the schedule, quantitative and qualitative analysis of the schedules and the risks, and then we did run the reports, the risk analysis, and we had the outputs from that, and then we used the outputs to say, you know, look guys, this is the potential impact on the programme if X, Y, Z happens, what we're going to do about it. But yeah, some do, some don't. Some don't even do risk management. They have a risk register, therefore they do risk management. Okay, it's not the case. There is some really good best practice in the UK. it tends to be on the high-profile programs, that need to succeed, that the government tends to be involved with.
You mentioned cultural change in your presentation. Do you find that the need for cultural change in projects and environment is both recognised and supported? My experience is that recognised and supported by business and project work.
I think it's recognised and supported by the experts, and I think in some cases it is recognised by board level. It's like anything to do with project control, and to be honest, any change that you're putting into an organisation, or advancement of a technology or advancement of process, culture is the key issue. Best processes in the world, best tool sets in the world. If you haven't got the people engaged with the process and the tool sets and the theory, it's never going to happen. So the cultural aspect of it, the training, the mentoring, the development, and spending time with individuals to grow them as the change grows, is key to success for any of this stuff.
Standard training?
Ooh, that varies a lot. I mean, my own experience through training, Mick, you going on this training, so I'd sit in front of a trainer with a screen in front of me. They'd show me where to point and click on a tool set, or they'd run me through a process. They'd go away, and all of a sudden Mick Higgins is now the expert in that new process that they're implementing. Am I? All right. I saw a tool set demonstration as far as I was concerned, and a process demonstration. The training that's really worked that I've seen in the past, and it's actually, some of it's getting really smart now, it's more the one-to-one practical learning experiences. Sitting down with people who've been through it, tried and tested, and being developed organically. I found e-learning packages useful to have in the background. So, I've forgotten what I learned last week, or I'm not too sure how to use this element of the tool set. At least I've got something to refer to where I can bring it up, point and click. Oracle do a fantastic one. I think it's UPK. So what that does is take you through the contract management process. It'll take you through Primavera, and it'll show you exactly where to point and click. We've just developed one for Cobra and Winsight, which is pretty good, I think. I think, Mike, you're on the receiving end of some of that stuff that we're delivering recently. And then I think some of the simulation training that's coming out at the moment, which it's not necessarily, well, it's not about tool set, it's about the actual process, the theoretical side of things, but giving not a real life example, but using a scenario that you run through. So put a plan together, and you've got these resources, and it's online. It's a simulation that you can run in, and you can even get these tailorable to your organisation. So you could say, right, well, I want an oil and gas project putting into this simulation. So the simulation writers go away, put an example of an oil and gas industry, and then you can run that in groups. And what we found effective when we've run these before is when you split people out into teams. So there's almost a bit of a competition element between teams. And that tends to gel people together as well. So training, I think, is getting better. I think there's a lot of resources. I mean, with the internet as well, there's a huge amount of resource for training. But still, the common flavour in organisations is, I'll send him on a training course, he's now the expert, and that's all he needs. It's like anything, it's the continuous support through the career and the career development frameworks. Well, I'm 5 minutes early. Okay.
When you were involved in the larger organisations, you said you have many subcontractors, smaller suppliers.
So many.
Did you get them to impose some kind of risk management?
Yes, as part of the contract, what we did, we even flowed down end value management requirements on them. And we flowed down the risk management requirements onto them. However, it was because of the value and their complexity of their element of the programme, and the delivery wasn't necessarily as big and as integrated as what we were doing as an organisation. It would be a case of, right, on a monthly basis, we want you to update an Excel sheet in this format. We want to see a report of the reviews that you came out with, because then what I could do is take that Excel format and directly feed it into our engine for risk. And then we could review all our supplier risks to come out with, say, the top 10 supplier risks. And then maybe integrate one or two of them into Eurocopter's top 10 risks for our programme. So we had a standard template, and we found it important to write it in the contract. And even though we flogged down some of the EVM requirements in the contract, getting things out of some of our suppliers as simple as, can I have a progress schedule on a monthly basis, please? It proved really difficult. And I think one of our suppliers was our own company. The problem we had with that was, because they're the mother company, so we were basically a subsidiary of them, but we were the lead, the prime on the contract. The amount of difficulty and the arguments we had with dealing with our own company, based out in France, and trying to impose earned value management, flow down, risk management. The risk management wasn't too bad, because that was part of group policy and it flowed down, and it's thou shall do risk management. But the problems we had getting earned value management, schedule updates, an honest and truthful approach to exactly where you were when you were requested for it, it was a real challenge, to be quite honest.
So at some level there wasn't really a philosophical grasp of the importance of this stuff.
For the enterprise risk management, in our own organisation, yeah, the CEO, it was mandated, it was flowed down, it was across, I think, the 6 divisions of EADS, it's flowed down into programmes and at an appropriate level. The tool set, the expert, everything was in place. So Eurocopter and EADS 100% bought into it. Suppliers, I would say, probably got a good 70% return on when we requested information from them for the risk. It was reasonably well done. But there were 1 or 2 suppliers who would deem it as, well, as part of the contract, we're going to charge you more money to do that because we think it's going to take us a lot of time. Well, you're talking about a monthly risk review, you know, depending on their own internal processes. So the suppliers were a challenge, obviously depending on what the contract managers had agreed and flowed down to them. But internally, Eurocopter Group, they were very, very keen within Eurocopter because of the mandate and the policy that had been set at a strategic level.
Are there methods of bringing the basics of risk management to small and medium enterprises who may not have the resources to have a dedicated person to look at all this, but on the other hand, somebody might have learned, okay, we've gone and learned how to do Microsoft projects, and they might have learned a bit about earned value, and so they know roughly what's there. Is there a fairly basic way of bringing risk management into this sort of thing?
You don't have to just look at enterprise risk management. You can look at, well, we're going to run risk management on a project-by-project basis, which is what I've tended to find that the majority of organisations currently do, whether they use some complex system to do it, or whether they use an Excel spreadsheet because you're talking about £10,000 worth of work. It's more about the process than not the actual tool set. It's making sure that you're looking through the steps of risk, identifying it, actually looking at what you're going to do about it, how you could mitigate it, planning it out, and then actually managing that risk through. So even down to having simple Excel templates in place for a small to medium enterprise, it would suffice. It's what's appropriate to the organisation or the programme.
What I was actually getting at was the actual philosophy behind it, and the awareness of that into the SMEs as well. Because once you understand the principles, then of course you can create an Excel spreadsheet and do it. But
again, it's back to having the top level buy-in. So whoever's the top guy for the organisation, if the policy is set, and you might do a slightly lighter policy than something like a full enterprise risk management system, but as long as the fundamentals and the policy are flowed down to the organisation by the top guy there, then what you'll tend to find is that people will follow, because everyone has a career path. Everybody likes to please most people like to please their bosses. And you tend to find that it's a natural flow out from there. It's having that top level engagement that's key for the majority of this type of stuff. Very similar with my experiences with earned value management as well. If I didn't answer it, if you want to take it offline, I mean, we can chat further.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the recent fiasco with the banks and the lack of any risk management, or what information they were getting from the value agencies was completely wrong. What hope is there when the biggest organisations in the country simply don't bother with that kind of thing?
It's interesting. I was speaking to a friend of mine who works for Barclays Bank now. They brought him in from a defence background to manage the project management organisation. I was speaking to him the other day. How's it going, Mick? It's completely different. He said, I really miss the defence environment. They don't understand key terminology from things like the PMI, the APM. They don't do it as industry does it. They do it a completely different way. And all our ideas and research and implementation plans that we've got have now been put on hold because they don't understand what we're trying to do. But then again, I've not been in the finance world yet. I'd like to be and see what they do. Any more for any more? Thank you very much.